The last rays of the dying sun painted the dusty trail crimson as the stagecoach rattled through Comanche Pass. The passengers inside unaware their lives were about to change forever. Zara Whitfield clutched her reticule tightly against her chest, the gentle swaying of the coach doing little to calm her frayed nerves. After 3 days of travel from Boston to Wyoming Territory, she was exhausted but determined to reach her final destination, Grass Valley, where she would begin her new position as the town's schoolteacher. "Shouldn't be more than an hour now, miss," the elderly gentleman across from her said kindly, tipping his hat. "Grass Valley's just beyond these foothills." Zara offered him a grateful smile. "Thank you, sir. I must admit I'm quite ready for a proper bed." The stagecoach carried 5 passengers besides Zara: the elderly gentleman and his wife, a banker from Cheyenne, a young man headed to work in the silver mines, and a quiet woman traveling to meet her brother. The journey had been long, dusty, and uncomfortable, but Zara had endured it with quiet dignity, even when the banker had made thinly veiled inquiries about her marital status. At 22, Zara had left behind a comfortable life in Boston for the promise of independence in the West. Her parents had passed away from influenza 2 winters ago, leaving her with few prospects beyond accepting her aunt's invitation to live as her companion, an arrangement that had quickly proved stifling. When she'd seen the advertisement for a schoolteacher in Wyoming Territory, she'd seized the opportunity despite her family's protests. The stagecoach lurched suddenly, and the driver's voice called down, "Rider coming up fast behind us." The passengers exchanged nervous glances. The banker leaned forward to peer out the window. "Probably just a messenger," he said, though his voice betrayed uncertainty. Moments later, they heard it pounding hoofbeats gaining on them rapidly. The driver snapped his whip, urging the team faster, but the coach was heavy and the road steep. "I don't like this," the miner muttered, reaching inside his coat. The elderly gentleman patted his wife's hand reassuringly, though his eyes remained fixed on the window. The stagecoach jerked violently as the driver attempted to outrun whoever was pursuing them. Zara gripped the leather strap beside her seat, heart thundering in her chest. The Wyoming sunset blazed through the windows, casting long shadows across the interior of the coach. Then came the shout, "Stop the coach!" followed by a gunshot that cracked through the evening air. The banker turned pale. "Bandits," he whispered. The coach slowed, the driver clearly deciding that resistance was futile. Zara felt ice in her veins. She'd heard stories of stagecoach robberies, of course, but had never imagined experiencing one herself. Her fingers tightened around her reticule, which contained not only her meager savings, but also the letter of introduction to the town council of Grass Valley. As the coach ground to a halt, dust swirling in the crimson light, the elderly woman began to weep softly. Her husband squeezed her hand. "It'll be all right, Martha. They just want valuables." The banker's expression darkened. "I'm carrying bank documents. They can't." "Quiet," the miner hissed. "Don't give them reason to be violent." Rough voices surrounded the coach now, and Zara counted at least 4 distinct speakers. The door was yanked open, revealing a masked man pointing a revolver into the coach. "Everyone out," he demanded, his voice muffled by the bandana covering his face. Nice and slow. One by one, they descended from the coach. Zara was the last to step down, and when she emerged into the dying light, she saw their situation clearly. 5 masked men on horseback, each armed, had surrounded the stagecoach. The driver and shotgun messenger stood with their hands raised, looking grim. "Ladies and gentlemen," one of the bandits announced, seemingly the leader from his commanding presence, "this won't take but a few minutes of your time. Empty your pockets and valuables into this bag, and nobody needs to get hurt." He tossed a sack to one of his companions, who dismounted and began moving among the passengers. The banker protested when asked to surrender his case, earning himself a rough shove and the threat of a pistol pressed to his temple. After that, no one else resisted. When the outlaw reached Zara, she reluctantly handed over her reticule, tears stinging her eyes as she thought of the money she'd saved for months' money that was supposed to help her establish herself in Grass Valley. "Please," she whispered. "The letter inside, it's my introduction to the town council. I need it for my position." The bandit hesitated, then roughly dumped the contents of her reticule. He pocketed the money but tossed the letter back to her. "Don't need no paper," he muttered. As this was happening, one of the other outlaws had climbed atop the coach to rummage through the luggage strapped to the roof. He let out a whoop of triumph as he located the strongbox. "Got it, boss," he called. The leader nodded. "Blow it open." As the bandit prepared to dynamite the lockbox, a sound drew everyone's attention, the steady rhythm of approaching hoofbeats. The outlaws tensed, hands moving to weapons. "Riders coming," one of them warned. Their leader cursed. "How many?" "Just one, looks like." "Probably just some fool traveler," the leader said. "Deal with him quick if he interferes." The lone rider appeared over the ridge, silhouetted against the deepening purple sky. He approached at a steady pace, seemingly unconcerned by the scene before him. As he drew closer, Zara could make out his features. A tall man atop a powerful black stallion, his face partially shadowed by his hat, but his posture relaxed and confident despite riding into an obvious robbery. He reined his horse to a stop about 20 yards from the stagecoach. For a long moment, he simply observed the scene, as if taking inventory of the situation. "Evening," he finally called out, his voice deep and measured. "Seems like you boys are having yourselves a party." The leader of the outlaws turned his horse to face the newcomer. "Ride on, stranger." "This ain't your business." The man didn't move. Instead, he casually rested his hands on the pommel of his saddle. "Well now, I'm afraid I can't do that. You see, I've got personal interest in making sure this stagecoach reaches Grass Valley tonight." "You're outnumbered 5-1, the outlaw leader snarled. "I suggest you reconsider." The stranger's posture remained relaxed, but something in his demeanor changed, a subtle shift that made Zara's breath catch. "Last chance," he said quietly. "Get on your horses and ride away." One of the outlaws, growing impatient, drew his pistol and fired a warning shot. The stranger's response was immediate and devastating. His hand moved in a blur, drawing and firing in one fluid motion. The outlaw who had shot first clutched his arm, his weapon falling to the dust. What followed happened so quickly that Zara could barely process it. The stranger dismounted in one smooth motion, using his horse as cover as he fired again, this time hitting another bandit in the shoulder. "Get behind the coach," the stranger shouted to the passengers. Chaos erupted as the remaining outlaws opened fire. The passengers scattered, seeking cover. The banker and the miner ducked beneath the stagecoach, while the elderly couple huddled behind one of the wheels. Zara found herself frozen in place until the stranger appeared suddenly at her side, his hand gripping her arm. "Stay behind me until it's done," he commanded, pushing her toward the relative safety of the stagecoach while simultaneously drawing his second pistol. He positioned himself between her and the outlaws, his broad shoulders creating a human shield that made her feel inexplicably safe despite the bullets flying around them. 2 more shots rang out, and another bandit fell from his horse. The remaining outlaws, now clearly at a disadvantage, began to retreat. Their leader, however, turned his horse directly toward the stagecoach in a desperate charge. The stranger pushed Zara roughly to the ground and fired, the shot hitting the outlaw leader in the chest. The man tumbled from his horse, landing with a heavy thud in the dust. The remaining bandits, seeing their leader fall, turned their horses and fled into the gathering darkness. As quickly as it had begun, the gunfight was over. Silence descended on the scene, broken only by the nervous whinnying of horses and the groans of the wounded bandits. Zara's heart pounded in her ears as the stranger helped her to her feet. His touch was surprisingly gentle for hands that had just demonstrated such deadly precision. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his eyes scanning her for injuries. Zara shook her head, unable to find her voice. Up close, she could see him clearly for the first time, a man perhaps in his early 30s, with intense blue eyes set in a sun-weathered face. A thin scar ran along his jaw, and several days' worth of stubble darkened his cheeks. He wasn't conventionally handsome, but there was something compelling about him that made it difficult for her to look away. "Thank you," she finally managed. "You saved us all." He nodded once, then turned his attention to the other passengers. "Everyone else all right?" There was a chorus of shaky affirmatives as the passengers emerged from their hiding places. The driver climbed down from the coach, his expression a mixture of relief and gratitude. "Damn fine shooting, mister," he said. "Don't know where you came from, but I'm mighty glad you showed up." The stranger holstered his pistols. "You might want to tie up the wounded ones before they get any ideas about crawling away. Sheriff Blackburn in Grass Valley will want to question them." As the driver and the miner secured the wounded outlaws, the stranger retrieved his horse, which had retreated to a safe distance during the gunfight. Zara watched him, still trying to make sense of what had just happened. "You know the sheriff in Grass Valley?" she asked when he returned. He nodded. "Known him for years." He extended his hand. "I'm Dawson Ryder." "Zara Whitfield," she replied, accepting his handshake. His palm was calloused but warm against her skin. "I'm the new school teacher." Something flickered in his eyes, surprise, perhaps, or recognition. "Miss Whitfield," he said, "the town's been expecting you. I was headed out to meet the stagecoach when I heard the shots." "You were coming to meet me?" Zara asked, confused. "The council asked me to escort you to town," he explained. "They were concerned about you traveling alone." Seems their concerns were justified. Before Zara could respond, the driver approached them. "Mr. Ryder, we need to get these folks to town, but 2 of my horses took bullets in the commotion. They're not badly hurt, but I don't want to push them." Dawson considered this. "Unhitch the injured animals. I'll ride ahead to Grass Valley and send back help. Should be able to get a wagon out here within the hour." The driver nodded gratefully. "Much obliged." Dawson turned back to Zara. "If you don't mind riding double, Miss Whitfield, I can take you to town now." "It's getting dark and it's not safe to remain here." Zara hesitated, glancing at her fellow passengers. The elderly gentleman stepped forward. "Go ahead, my dear. No sense in all of us waiting here." "Are you certain?" Zara asked. "Absolutely," the gentleman assured her. "Besides, you should arrive in town before full dark for propriety's sake." This was a valid consideration, Zara realized. Arriving in town after nightfall, unescorted, would hardly make a favorable first impression on the town council. "Very well," she agreed, turning back to Dawson. "Thank you, Mr. Ryder." While the others worked to secure the wounded bandits and tend to the injured horses, Dawson helped Zara retrieve her trunk from the stagecoach roof. It would remain with the coach until the relief wagon arrived, but she was able to extract a small valise containing her immediate necessities. With these practical matters settled, Dawson led her to his horse, an impressive black stallion that stood nearly 17 hands high. "This is Midnight," Dawson said, patting the horse's neck. "Don't let his size fool you. He's gentle as a lamb when he wants to be." Zara approached the massive animal cautiously. She had some experience with horses from her youth in Boston, but never one so large and powerful. Midnight regarded her with intelligent eyes, then lowered his head to sniff at her hand. "He likes you," Dawson observed, a hint of surprise in his voice. "The feeling is mutual," Zara replied, stroking the horse's velvety muzzle. With surprisingly little awkwardness, Dawson helped her mount, then swung up behind her. Zara was immediately aware of his proximity, the solid warmth of his chest against her back, his arms reaching around her to take the reins. It was an intimacy she had never experienced with a man before, and she felt her cheeks flush with heat. "Comfortable?" he asked, his voice close to her ear. "Yes, thank you," she managed, grateful he couldn't see her face. With a gentle nudge of his heels, Dawson set Midnight in motion. They bid farewell to the Stagecoach passengers with promises of sending help quickly, then set off toward Grass Valley at a steady trot. As they rode, the last light of day faded from the sky, replaced by a brilliant canopy of stars such as Zara had never seen in Boston. The air grew cooler, and she was thankful for the warmth of Dawson's presence behind her. "Have you been a teacher long, Miss Whitfield?" he asked after they had ridden in silence for some time. "I taught at a girls' school in Boston for 2 years," she replied. "But this will be my first position as head teacher. And you came all the way out here on your own." There was a note of admiration in his voice that pleased her. "I did. My parents passed away 2 years ago, and I found myself in need of a change." "I'm sorry about your parents," he said quietly. "Thank you." She paused, then added, "What about you, Mr. Ryder? Have you lived in Grass Valley long, going on 5 years now? I came west after the war. She should have guessed from his age and the controlled precision with which he'd handled himself during the robbery. "You fought for the Union." "Yes, madam. Cavalry." That explained his exceptional horsemanship and marksmanship. "And now I run a small ranch outside of town. Raise horses mostly." "Is that all?" she asked, sensing there was more to his story. He chuckled, the sound rumbling against her back. "Perceptive, aren't you? I also serve as deputy sheriff when Sheriff Blackburn needs an extra hand." "Which is why you're so familiar with handling outlaws," she concluded. "You could say that." They fell into comfortable silence again, the rhythmic sound of Midnight's hooves on the hard, packed earth the only noise in the vast darkness. After a while, Zara noticed a faint glow on the horizon lights from Grass Valley. "Almost there," Dawson said. "The town's not much compared to Boston, but it's growing. Good people for the most part." "I'm sure it will be lovely," Zara replied, though in truth, she was beginning to feel a flutter of anxiety. What if she couldn't adapt to life in this rugged territory? What if the townspeople found her too refined, too Eastern? As if sensing her thoughts, Dawson spoke again. "The children need a proper education. The last teacher left 6 months ago to get married, and no one's been able to fill her shoes. The town's grateful you've come." His words reassured her somewhat, and as they drew closer to Grass Valley, she began to make out individual buildings, a church steeple silhouetted against the night sky, the broad front of what must be the main street, scattered houses with warm light spilling from their windows. They rode down the main street, and despite the late hour, several people called out greetings to Dawson. He responded with easy familiarity, occasionally introducing Zara as our new school teacher, with a note of pride in his voice that made her feel welcome. "I've arranged for you to stay at Mrs. Henderson's boarding house," Dawson informed her as they approached a 2-story clapboard building set slightly back from the street. "It's respectable and clean. Most unmarried ladies in town board there." He reined Midnight to a stop and dismounted, then reached up to help Zara down. His hands encircled her waist, and for a moment as he lowered her to the ground, their faces were close enough that she could see the flecks of gray in his blue eyes. "Thank you for your escort, Mr. Ryder," she said, stepping back to a more proper distance. "My pleasure, Miss Whitfield." He collected her valise from where it had been secured behind the saddle. "I should warn you that Mrs. Henderson will likely have many questions. She's kind but curious." As if summoned by his words, the door of the boarding house opened, spilling light onto the porch. A plump woman in her 50s appeared, her face lighting up when she saw them. "Dawson Ryder, is that our new school teacher you've brought?" she called, bustling down the steps. "It is indeed, Mrs. Henderson," Dawson replied. "May I present Miss Zara Whitfield of Boston?" "Miss Whitfield, this is Mrs. Eliza Henderson." "Oh, my dear, we're so pleased you've arrived safely," Mrs. Henderson said, taking Zara's hands in her own. "We were beginning to worry when the stagecoach didn't arrive on schedule." "There was a bit of trouble on the road," Dawson explained. "Robbery attempt. The coach should be along within a few hours. I need to send some men back with a wagon to help them." Mrs. Henderson's eyes widened. "Gracious! Were you harmed, Miss Whitfield?" "Not at all, thanks to Mr. Ryder's intervention," Zara assured her. "He arrived just in time, Mrs." Henderson gave Dawson an approving look. "Always in the right place at the right time, aren't you, Dawson?" She turned back to Zara. "Well, you must be exhausted, my dear. Come inside and I'll show you to your room. I've kept some supper warm for you," as Zara followed Mrs. Henderson toward the house. She turned back to Dawson. "Will I see you again, Mr. Ryder?" Something warm flickered in his eyes. "Count on it, Miss Whitfield. The school board meets tomorrow at noon to officially welcome you. I'll be there." He tipped his hat. "Rest well." As he mounted Midnight and rode off to organize the rescue party for the stagecoach, Zara couldn't help but watch him go, aware that her life in Grass Valley, Wyoming territory, had begun in a far more dramatic fashion than she'd anticipated. And something told her that Dawson Ryder would feature prominently in whatever adventure lay ahead. Mrs. Henderson's boarding house proved to be exactly as Dawson had described: clean, comfortable, and respectable. Her room was small but well appointed, with a narrow bed, a dresser with a mirror, a washstand, and a rocking chair near the window. The walls were papered in a delicate floral pattern, and crisp white curtains framed the window that looked out onto the main street of Grass Valley. After a simple but satisfying meal of beef stew and fresh bread, Zara retired to her room, exhausted from the day's events. As she prepared for bed, she found herself replaying the robbery and Dawson's timely arrival. The memory of his steady presence behind her on the ride to town lingered, and she wondered what sort of man he truly was beneath his composed exterior. Sleep came quickly despite her racing thoughts, and she dreamed of galloping horses and a pair of intense blue eyes watching over her. Morning brought sunshine streaming through her window, and the sounds of a town coming to life. Zara dressed in one of her better dresses, a deep blue wool with white piping that she hoped struck the right balance between professional and approachable, and made her way downstairs. The dining room of the boarding house was occupied by 3 other women, whom Mrs. Henderson promptly introduced as Miss Abigail Grant, the milliner, Miss Harriet Foster, who worked at the telegraph office, and Mrs. Clara Wilson, a widow who managed the dry goods store. All 3 welcomed Zara warmly, though she noticed they exchanged knowing glances when Mrs. Henderson mentioned that Dawson Ryder had escorted her into town. "Mr. Ryder doesn't often involve himself with newcomers," Miss Grant remarked with a smile that suggested she found this fact significant. "He's a private man," Mrs. Wilson added. "Keeps to himself mostly, except when he's working with the sheriff. Or training those magnificent horses of his," Miss Foster said with a sigh that made the others laugh. Zara felt a blush creeping up her neck. "He was very kind to escort me to town after the stagecoach was delayed." "Delayed, indeed," Mrs. Henderson exclaimed. "The poor girl was nearly killed in a robbery, ladies." This announcement led to a barrage of questions about the incident, which Zara answered as calmly as possible, trying to downplay both the danger and Dawson's heroics. Nevertheless, by the time breakfast was finished, she suspected that Dawson's reputation in her eyes had been thoroughly analyzed and found intriguing by her fellow boarders. After breakfast, Mrs. Henderson accompanied Zara to the schoolhouse, a simple one-room building at the edge of town. It was larger than Zara had expected, with windows along both sides to provide ample light and ventilation. Inside were rows of desks, a pot-bellied stove for heating, a teacher's desk on a small raised platform, and a blackboard covering most of one wall. "We have 28 students enrolled," Mrs. Henderson explained as they inspected the room. "Ages 6 to 16. The older boys only attend during the winter months when they're not needed for ranch work." Zara ran her hand along the smooth surface of the teacher's desk, already imagining herself standing before the class. "It's perfect," she said sincerely. Mrs. Henderson beamed. "I'm so glad you think so. The town council will meet you at the mayor's office at noon. That gives us time to retrieve your trunk from the Stagecoach office and get you properly settled." As they walked back toward the center of town, Zara began to appreciate the charm of Grass Valley. Though small compared to Boston, it was a proper town with all the necessary amenities. A general store, a bank, a telegraph office, a small hotel in addition to Mrs. Henderson's boarding house, a church, a sheriff's office and jail, a doctor's residence, and several saloons that Zara planned to give a wide berth. The people they passed greeted them warmly, many expressing their pleasure at finally having a new teacher. Zara was introduced to so many residents that she feared she would never remember all their names, but she was touched by their genuine welcome. At the Stagecoach office, they found Zara's trunk waiting for her, along with a message from the driver thanking her again for her composure during the robbery. The agent also handed her a small leather pouch. "Mr. Ryder left this for you," the agent explained. "Said it belonged to you." Inside the pouch, Zara found the money that had been stolen from her reticule. A small note accompanied it. "Retrieved from the outlaws. They won't be needing it where they're going. Dr." Zara clutched the pouch, deeply moved by Dawson's thoughtfulness. Mrs. Henderson, reading over her shoulder, smiled knowingly. "That's Dawson for you," she said. "Does what needs doing without fuss." They arranged for Zara's trunk to be delivered to the boarding house, then continued their tour of the town. As noon approached, they made their way to the mayor's office, a small but dignified building next to the bank. Inside, Zara found 5 men waiting for her. Mayor Thomas Gardner, a rotund man with an impressive mustache. Reverend Jonathan Wells, the local minister doctor. Samuel Porter, the town physician. Mr. Harold Fleming, the banker, and Sheriff James Blackburn, a graying man with a weathered face and sharp eyes. Dawson Ryder was also present, standing slightly apart from the others near the window. Zara felt his eyes on her as she entered, but he gave no sign of their shared adventure beyond a polite nod of recognition. Mayor Gardner stepped forward to greet her. "Miss Whitfield, welcome to Grass Valley. We're delighted you've arrived safely, especially after hearing about your ordeal yesterday." "Thank you, Mayor," Zara replied. "I'm very happy to be here." The meeting proceeded smoothly. The council members asked about her teaching experience and qualifications, outlined their expectations for the school, and answered her questions about curriculum and supplies. Throughout, Zara was aware of Dawson's quiet presence, though he spoke only when directly addressed. As the meeting concluded, Mayor Gardner handed Zara a key. "The schoolhouse is yours, Miss Whitfield. Classes are set to begin on Monday, which gives you the rest of the week to prepare. Is there anything else you need?" "I believe I have everything necessary to start," Zara assured him. "I look forward to meeting the children." With the formal business concluded, the council members departed one by one, each offering final words of welcome. Soon only Zara, Mrs. Henderson, and Dawson remained. "I'll escort Miss Whitfield back to the boarding house," Dawson offered, speaking for the first time since the meeting began. Mrs. Henderson's eyes twinkled. "How thoughtful of you, Dawson. I actually need to stop at the general store, so perhaps you could see Miss Whitfield safely home." Before Zara could protest that she was perfectly capable of walking the short distance alone, Mrs. Henderson had bustled out the door, leaving her alone with Dawson. "She's not very subtle, is she?" Dawson remarked, a hint of amusement in his voice. Zara laughed despite herself. "Not at all." She held up the leather pouch. "Thank you for returning my money. That was very kind," he shrugged. "It's yours. I just made sure it got back to you." He offered his arm. "Shall we?" As they walked back toward the boarding house, several townspeople observed them with evident interest. Zara realized that their association, innocent as it was, had already become the subject of local speculation. "I'm afraid I've unwittingly made you the center of attention," she said apologetically. Dawson's mouth quirked into a half-smile. "Small town. Not much excitement beyond a new schoolteacher and the occasional stagecoach robbery. Speaking of which, what happened to the outlaws? 3 are in jail awaiting trial. 1 died of his wounds last night. The 5th got away, but he won't get far." His voice held absolute certainty. "Sheriff's got men looking for him." They reached the boarding house, and Dawson hesitated at the bottom of the steps. "The town's organizing a welcome social for you on Saturday evening at the church. Nothing fancy, just a chance for you to meet more of the residents." "That sounds lovely," Zara said. "I was wondering." He paused, looking uncharacteristically uncertain. "Would you allow me to escort you to the social?" Zara felt a flutter of something warm in her chest. "I would like that very much, Mr. Ryder." "Dawson," he corrected gently. "Dawson," she echoed, testing the name on her tongue. "Then you must call me Zara." He nodded, his eyes holding hers for a moment longer than strictly proper. "Until Saturday, Zara." As he walked away, Zara stood on the porch watching him go. She had come to Grass Valley seeking independence and purpose. She hadn't expected to find herself drawn to a quiet, enigmatic cowboy within hours of her arrival. Yet there was something about Dawson Ryder that intrigued her, something beyond his timely rescue or his evident competence. There was a depth to him, a stillness that called to her like a promise of shelter in a storm. Shaking her head at her own fanciful thoughts, Zara entered the boarding house, already wondering what she would wear to Saturday's social. The next few days passed in a blur of activity as Zara prepared for the start of school. She spent hours at the schoolhouse, organizing books, preparing lessons, and arranging the classroom. Several of the town's children stopped by with their parents, eager to meet their new teacher, and Zara was pleased by their enthusiasm for learning. She saw Dawson only in passing during this time once when he rode through town with Sheriff Blackburn, presumably on official business, and again when she was leaving the general store with supplies for the schoolhouse. Each time, he tipped his hat to her with that same quiet intensity in his eyes, and each time, she found herself thinking about him long after he'd gone. On Saturday evening, Zara dressed with particular care for the social, selecting a gown of deep green silk that she'd brought from Boston. It was perhaps a touch formal for a small-town gathering, but she wanted to make a good impression on the community. She arranged her chestnut hair in a simple but elegant style, secured with a mother-of-pearl comb that had belonged to her mother, when Mrs. Henderson knocked to announce that Dawson had arrived. Zara felt an unexpected flutter of nerves. Taking a deep breath to compose herself, she descended the stairs to find him waiting in the parlor. He turned as she entered, and the look in his eyes made her glad she'd chosen the green silk. He was dressed more formally than she'd seen him before, in a clean black suit, white shirt, and string tie. His dark hair was neatly combed and he'd shaved, revealing the strong line of his jaw without the shadow of stubble. "You look beautiful," he said simply. "Thank you." "You look quite handsome yourself." The compliment felt bold on her lips, but his pleased expression told her it was welcome. Mrs. Henderson watched their exchange with undisguised delight. "Don't you make a fine pair? Now off with you both. Everyone will be waiting." The church was only a short walk away, and the evening was pleasantly cool. Dawson offered Zara his arm, and she took it, feeling the solid strength beneath the fabric of his suit. Nervous, he asked as they walked. A little, she admitted. I want them to like me. They already do, he assured her. Word of how you handled the robbery has spread. They're impressed by your courage. I wasn't very courageous, Zara protested. I was terrified. Courage isn't about not feeling fear, it's about facing it. She glanced up at him. Is that what you learned in the war? A shadow crossed his face. Among other things. Sensing she'd touched on a difficult subject, Zara changed the topic. Tell me about your horses. The ladies at the boarding house seem quite impressed by them. His expression lightened immediately. I breed and train quarter horses primarily. Started with just 2 when I came to Wyoming, a stallion and a mare. Now I've got 15, including some of the fastest cutting horses in the territory. The pride in his voice was evident, and Zara found herself smiling. I'd like to see them someday. I'd like that too. He looked down at her, his expression softening. Maybe tomorrow, if you're free, I could ride into town, pick you up after church. That sounds wonderful, Zara replied, pleased by the invitation. They had reached the church by then, and any further conversation was postponed as they entered to find what seemed like the entire population of Grass Valley waiting to welcome them. The church hall had been decorated with wildflowers and paper streamers, and tables lined the walls laden with food brought by the townspeople. For the next 2 hours, Zara was introduced to dozens of residents, many of whom were parents of her future students. She met the blacksmith and his wife, the town's only lawyer and his family, several ranchers and their wives, the telegraph operator, Miss Foster's superior, and countless others whose names and faces began to blur together despite her best efforts to remember them all. Throughout it all, Dawson remained close by, occasionally guiding her with a light touch at her elbow or introducing her to someone she hadn't yet met. She noticed that many of the townspeople treated him with a mixture of respect and caution, as if unsure how to approach him. Yet he seemed perfectly at ease, if somewhat reserved, in the social setting. I don't think Mr. Ryder has ever attended a town social with a lady before, Mrs. Wilson whispered to Zara when they found themselves near the refreshment table. He usually makes an appearance out of duty, then disappears. Really? Zara glanced across the room where Dawson was engaged in conversation with Sheriff Blackburn. As if sensing her gaze, he looked up and met her eyes, offering a small smile before returning his attention to the sheriff. Oh yes, Mrs. Wilson continued. Very private man, our Mr. Ryder. Came here after the war, bought that land outside town, and keeps mostly to himself except for sheriff business. Some say he was some kind of scout or spy during the war, but he never speaks of it. Zara's curiosity about Dawson grew with each piece of information she gathered. The evening progressed pleasantly, with music provided by a local fiddler and his son on the harmonica. There was even dancing, though of a more sedate variety than might be found in a saloon. When Reverend Wells announced a Virginia reel, Dawson appeared at Zara's side. "May I have this dance?" he asked, offering his hand. Zara accepted and soon found herself swept into the lively dance. Dawson moved with unexpected grace for such a tall man, guiding her through the steps with confidence. Their hands met and parted, their eyes locked and released, and Zara felt a growing connection that went beyond their shared experience on the stagecoach. As the evening drew to a close, Mayor Gardner called for attention and proposed a toast to Grass Valley's new schoolteacher. Zara blushed as all eyes turned to her, raising their glasses in welcome. "Thank you all for such a warm welcome," she said when the mayor invited her to speak. "I'm honored to be entrusted with the education of your children, and I promise to do my very best for them. I look forward to becoming part of this community." Her simple words were met with enthusiasm, and as the gathering dispersed, many of the townsfolk stopped to express their pleasure at having her join them. Dawson waited patiently until the last well-wishers had departed, then offered to walk Zara back to the boarding house. The night had grown cooler, and when she shivered slightly, he removed his coat and draped it around her shoulders without comment. They walked in comfortable silence for a time, the events of the evening settling around them like the quiet of the night. "Thank you for escorting me tonight," Zara said as they approached the boarding house. "I enjoyed myself far more than I expected to." "As did I," Dawson replied. "More than I have in a very long time." They reached the porch and Zara reluctantly removed his coat, returning it to him. "I should go in." "Yes." But neither of them moved. In the faint light from the parlor window, his eyes were dark and unreadable. "I'll come for you tomorrow after church, around 1 o'clock. I'll be ready," Zara promised. He hesitated, then took her hand and raised it to his lips, brushing a kiss across her knuckles that was barely a touch yet sent warmth spiraling through her. "Good night, Zara." "Good night, Dawson." She watched from the porch as he walked away, disappearing into the darkness of the Wyoming night, and wondered at the swift, inexplicable connection forming between them. Boston society would have been scandalized by how quickly she'd accepted his attentions, but here in this frontier town, different rules seemed to apply. Or perhaps it was simply that life was more precarious in the West, making people less inclined to waste time on excessive formalities when something genuine presented itself. Whatever the reason, Zara found herself looking forward to the next day with an anticipation that had little to do with seeing horses and everything to do with spending time alone with Dawson Ryder. Sunday dawned clear and bright, the sky an endless blue expanse over Grass Valley. Zara attended the morning service at the church, where Reverend Wells delivered a sermon on community and fellowship that seemed particularly appropriate given her recent arrival. She noticed Dawson sitting near the back, his tall figure easy to spot among the congregation. He met her eyes briefly when she glanced his way, inclining his head in silent greeting. After the service, Zara returned to the boarding house to change into more suitable attire for visiting a ranch, a simple navy skirt, white shirtwaist, and sturdy boots that she hoped would be appropriate for the occasion. She was just pinning her hat when Mrs. Henderson knocked on her door to announce that Dawson had arrived. He waited in the parlor, dressed in what she was coming to think of as his everyday attire. Dark trousers, a blue shirt open at the collar, a leather vest, and boots that had seen considerable use. A wide-brimmed hat hung from one hand, and he turned it absently as she entered. "Ready for your adventure?" he asked, a smile warming his features. "Absolutely," she replied, matching his smile with one of her own. Outside, she discovered he had brought a light buggy rather than his horse. "Thought this might be more comfortable for you than riding double again," he explained as he helped her up to the seat. The consideration touched her. "Thank you. Though I should tell you I do know how to ride. I took lessons in Boston. Did you now?" He looked pleased at this information as he climbed up beside her and took the reins. "Maybe next time you can ride one of my mares." The ride to Dawson's ranch took about 20 minutes, following a well-maintained road that led north out of town. As they traveled, the landscape opened up around them, rolling grassland dotted with stands of aspen and pine, the mountains rising blue and majestic in the distance. "It's beautiful," Zara breathed, taking in the vastness of the Wyoming countryside. "It grows on you," Dawson agreed. "When I first came here, I thought it was too empty, too quiet. Now I can't imagine being anywhere else." They crested a small rise, and suddenly his ranch came into view, a neat collection of buildings nestled in a small valley beside a creek. There was a main house built of logs with a stone chimney, a large barn, several corrals, and what appeared to be a bunkhouse. "It's not much," Dawson said, a hint of uncertainty in his voice. "Nothing like what you'd be used to in Boston." "It's wonderful," Zara assured him honestly. The ranch had a solid, well-cared-for appearance that spoke of hard work and pride. As they approached, a young man emerged from the barn waving to them. Dawson returned the wave. "That's Luke, my ranch hand," he explained. "He and his wife Molly help me run the place." He reined the horses to a stop in front of the house, jumped down, and came around to help Zara descend. His hands were warm and strong at her waist, and for a brief moment when her feet touched the ground, they stood very close, his hands lingering just a heartbeat longer than necessary. "Boss," Luke called, interrupting the moment as he jogged over to them. He was perhaps 20, with sandy hair and an open, friendly face. "Didn't expect you back so early. Luke, this is Miss Whitfield, the new schoolteacher. Miss Whitfield, Luke Peterson." "Madam," Luke said, touching his hat respectfully. "Pleasure to meet you. My Molly's been talking about nothing but the new teacher since we heard you were coming. She's hoping our Jamie will be ready for school next fall. How old is your son?" Zara inquired. "Just turned 5, madam." Smart as a whip, though, already knows his letters. The pride in his voice was unmistakable. "I look forward to having him in my class when he's ready," Zara said warmly. Luke beamed, then turned to Dawson. "Everything's fine here, boss. Storm's leg is looking better, and Mercury foaled last night healthy colt looks to have his daddy's markings." "That's good news," Dawson replied. "I'll take Miss Whitfield to see the horses. Is Molly in the house?" "Yes, sir, she's fixing dinner. Said to bring you both in when you're ready to eat." As Luke headed back to the barn, Dawson led Zara toward the largest of the corrals, where several horses grazed or dozed in the afternoon sun. "Most of my stock is out in the pasture," he explained, "but I keep the training horses closer to hand." For the next hour, Dawson introduced Zara to his horses, explaining each animal's lineage, temperament, and training with a depth of knowledge that impressed her. She met Spirit, his prize stallion, a magnificent chestnut with a white blaze; Midnight, the black horse that had carried them both to Grass Valley after the Stagecoach robbery, and several mares and geldings in various stages of training. What struck Zara most was the way the horses responded to Dawson. They came eagerly when he called, nuzzled his hands and pockets for treats, and seemed genuinely pleased by his attention. It was clear that his care for them went beyond their value as livestock. He genuinely loved these animals. "Would you like to meet the new foal?" he asked after showing her the training corral where a young cowboy was working with a spirited bay gelding. "I'd love to," Zara replied. He led her to a small, separate enclosure attached to the barn where a beautiful black mare stood protectively over a wobbly-legged colt. The foal was primarily black like its mother, but had white stockings on all 4 legs and a perfect diamond of white on its forehead. "Hello, Mercury," Dawson said softly to the mare, approaching slowly with his hand extended. The horse nickered in recognition and allowed him to stroke her neck. "This is Zara. She's a friend." Zara's heart warmed at being called his friend. She followed his lead, extending her hand slowly for the mare to sniff. After a moment's consideration, Mercury allowed Zara to touch her velvety muzzle. "She's beautiful," Zara said, "and her baby is perfect." "He is, isn't he?" Dawson's expression softened as he looked at the foal, which had overcome its initial wariness and was now investigating Dawson's boots with its muzzle. "Haven't named him yet. Any suggestions?" Zara studied the colt, noting the distinctive diamond marking. "What about Diamond? Or perhaps Star?" "Diamond," Dawson repeated, considering. "I like it. It suits him." The colt chose that moment to attempt a prancing step, lost its balance, and tumbled comically onto its side before scrambling back up with indignant dignity. Zara laughed, the sound clear and joyful in the quiet of the barn. Dawson turned to her, his expression transformed by a full smile that reached his eyes, making them crinkle at the corners. "You have a beautiful laugh," he said softly. Zara felt a blush rise to her cheeks. "Thank you. It's easy to be happy here. Your ranch is wonderful, Dawson." "I'm glad you think so." His eyes held hers, and for a moment, Something unspoken passed between them, a recognition, perhaps, of how comfortable they felt in each other's company despite having known each other for such a short time. The moment was broken by a woman's voice calling from the direction of the house. "Dawson, Luke says you're back with the new teacher. Dinner's ready." "That's Molly," Dawson explained, "and she's a fine cook. Shall we?" Zara nodded, and they reluctantly left the new mother in full to their bonding. As they walked toward the house, Dawson surprised her by offering his hand rather than his arm. After only a slight hesitation, she placed her hand in his, feeling the calluses on his palm, the gentle strength in his fingers as they closed around hers. Molly Peterson turned out to be a cheerful young woman with rosy cheeks and a welcoming smile. Her young son, Jamie, hid behind her skirts at first but was eventually coaxed out to meet the lady who's going to be your teacher someday. Dinner was a simple but delicious affair of roast beef, potatoes, fresh bread, and apple pie for dessert. The conversation flowed easily, with Luke and Molly eager to hear about Boston and Zara equally interested in their stories of life in Wyoming. Throughout the meal, she was aware of Dawson watching her, his eyes warm with approval as she engaged with his employees. After dinner, while Molly cleared the table with Luke's help, Dawson suggested showing Zara the view from the hill behind the house. They walked together up a gentle slope, past a small apple orchard, to a point where they could see the entire ranch spread out below them, and the mountains rising majestically beyond. "This is my favorite spot on the property," Dawson told her as they stood side by side, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the valley. "I come up here sometimes in the evening just to watch the sunset." "I can see why," Zara said, drinking in the vista. "It's breathtaking." A comfortable silence fell between them, broken only by the distant nickering of horses and the whisper of the wind through the grass. Zara glanced at Dawson, studying his profile as he gazed out over his land. There was a quiet satisfaction in his expression, a contentment that she found profoundly appealing. "May I ask you something personal?" she ventured after a time. He turned to her, eyebrows raised in question. "You can ask. Why did you come to Wyoming? After the war, I mean." "You could have gone anywhere." He was quiet for so long that Zara thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was reflective, as if he were carefully choosing his words. "During the war, I saw things. Did things that changed me. Afterward, I couldn't go back to Pennsylvania to my family's farm. It felt too small somehow, too confined." He gestured at the open country around them. "I needed space, room to breathe, and I needed to be somewhere new where people didn't know me or what I'd been part of." "And you found that here." "I did. Wyoming doesn't ask questions about a man's past. It only cares what he does now, today." He looked down at her. "What about you? Why did you really come west? Teaching positions must be plentiful in Boston." Zara considered how to answer. "After my parents died, I lived with my aunt. She's a good woman, but she had very definite ideas about what my life should be, whom I should marry, how I should behave. I felt trapped. When I saw the advertisement for a teacher in Wyoming, it seemed like an opportunity to make my own choices, to be judged on my own merits rather than my family connections or social standing." "Freedom," Dawson said, nodding in understanding. "We came looking for the same thing." "Yes, I suppose we did." She smiled up at him, touched by his perception. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. As they watched, Dawson's hand found hers again, his fingers intertwining with hers in a gesture that felt both protective and possessive. "Zara," he said quietly, "I know we haven't known each other long, but I feel—" He paused, searching for words. "There's something between us, something I haven't felt before." Her heart quickened. "I feel it too." He turned to face her fully, still holding her hand. "I'd like to call on you properly, if you'll allow it. In Boston, Such a declaration would have been preceded by months of formal visits and carefully chaperoned outings. But here in Wyoming, with the vast sky above them and the land stretching endlessly around them, the traditional rules seemed distant and irrelevant. "I'd like that very much," Zara replied, her voice steady despite the fluttering in her chest. His free hand came up to touch her cheek, his fingers gentle against her skin. "May I kiss you, Zara Whitfield?" Instead of answering, she raised her face to his, closing her eyes as his lips met hers in a kiss that was tender and questioning at first, then deeper as she responded. His arm slipped around her waist, drawing her closer, and Zara found herself leaning into his strength, her hand coming to rest against his chest, where she could feel the strong, steady beating of his heart. When they finally parted, Dawson rested his forehead against hers, his breath warm on her face. "I've wanted to do that since the moment I helped you down from the stagecoach," he confessed. "I'm glad you waited until now," Zara replied, smiling. "It was worth waiting for." He chuckled, the sound rumbling in his chest beneath her palm. "We should get back. It'll be dark soon, and I need to get you home before Mrs. Henderson sends out a search party." Reluctantly, they began the walk back to the house, their hands still joined. The kiss had changed something between them, acknowledging the attraction that had been building since their first meeting. Yet Zara didn't feel rushed or pressured. There was a respectful patience in Dawson's manner that told her he would give her all the time she needed to be certain of her feelings. As they reached the buggy, Molly came out to bid them farewell, pressing a jar of preserved peaches into Zara's hands as a gift. Luke appeared with little Jamie in tow, the boy now sufficiently comfortable with Zara to show her a carved wooden horse that Mr. Dawson made for me. Their goodbyes said, Dawson helped Zara into the buggy and climbed up beside her. As they drove away, Zara looked back at the ranch, already feeling a curious sense of belonging to this place she'd visited only once. The drive back to town was quiet, both of them content to enjoy the deepening twilight and each other's company without the need for constant conversation. When they reached the boarding house, Dawson helped Zara down, his hands lingering at her waist. "Thank you for coming today," he said. "I'll see you soon." "I'd like that," Zara replied, "though I'll be busy with the start of school tomorrow." "I understand. Maybe I could stop by after classes one day this week, walk you home." "Wednesday," Zara suggested. "School dismisses at 3. Dawson nodded, then glanced up at the boarding house where curtains had twitched in more than one window. "We have an audience," he murmured. "I know," Zara said with a small laugh. "Mrs. Henderson will have many questions. Let's give her something worth asking about then." With a glint of mischief in his eyes, Dawson leaned down and kissed her lightly on the lips, a brief but unmistakable gesture that would be clearly visible to anyone watching from the windows. Zara blushed, but didn't pull away, her heart too full of happiness to care about gossip. "Good night, Dawson." "Good night, Zara." He waited until she had entered the boarding house before climbing back into the buggy and driving away. Inside, Mrs. Henderson was waiting in the parlor, trying unsuccessfully to appear as if she hadn't been watching through the window. "Did you have a nice day, dear?" she asked with barely contained curiosity. "Lovely, thank you," Zara replied, unable to suppress her smile. "Dawson has a beautiful ranch and his horses are magnificent." "I'm sure they are," Mrs. Henderson said, eyes twinkling. "And that goodbye was that magnificent as well?" Zara's blush deepened. "Mrs. Henderson," the older woman laughed warmly. "Oh, my dear, I'm only teasing. I think it's wonderful. Dawson Ryder is a good man, and it's high time he found someone special." As Zara retired to her room that night, her mind was filled with images from the day Dawson's gentle handling of the horses, his quiet pride in his ranch, the look in his eyes just before he'd kissed her. For the first time since arriving in Wyoming, she felt as if she had found not just a job or a town, but a place where she truly belonged. The first day of school arrived with a mixture of excitement and nervousness for Zara. She rose early, dressed in a conservative dark blue dress with a white collar, and walked to the schoolhouse with plenty of time to prepare before her students arrived. To her surprise, a small crowd of parents and children were already gathered outside when she arrived, eager to begin the new school term. She greeted them warmly, unlocked the schoolhouse, and invited them in to see the preparations she'd made over the past few days. The children ranged in age from 6 to 16, just as Mrs. Henderson had said, with the majority falling between 8 and 12. They eyed her with curiosity as she welcomed each one by name, referring to the list she'd been given by the town council. Parents lingered for a time, introducing themselves and their children, offering words of encouragement and, in some cases, warnings about particular behavioral issues to watch for. Zara received all this information graciously, recognizing the trust these people were placing in her to educate their children. By 9 o'clock, the parents had departed, and Zara stood before 24 children of varying ages and abilities, ready to begin her first day as the teacher of Grass Valley School. "Good morning, students," she began, pleased when they responded in near unison. "I'm Miss Whitfield, and I'm very happy to be your teacher." The morning proceeded smoothly as Zara assessed her students' knowledge and divided them into appropriate groups for reading, arithmetic, and other subjects. The older students helped the younger ones, a practice Zara encouraged, and by noon, when she dismissed them for the lunch hour, she felt she had the beginnings of an orderly, productive classroom. Several children remained at the schoolhouse for lunch, and Zara sat with them on the steps outside, listening to their chatter about their families, their chores, and their interests. She learned that one boy's father ran the livery stable, while a girl's mother was the seamstress who had recently made curtains for the church. Two siblings lived on a sheep ranch 10 miles outside of town, riding in together on a pony each day. As the children talked, Zara realized how interconnected the lives of Grass Valley's residents were, how each family contributed to the community in ways both large and small. It was very different from Boston, where social circles rarely intersected, and people could live side by side for years without knowing their neighbors' names. The afternoon session went well, with only minor disciplinary issues that Zara handled firmly but kindly. By 3 o'clock, when she dismissed the class, she felt a deep satisfaction with her first day of teaching. The children filed out, many calling goodbyes or telling her they would see her tomorrow. As the last student departed, Zara began organizing the classroom for the next day, cleaning the blackboard, straightening desks, and making notes about adjustments to her teaching plan. She was so absorbed in her work that she didn't hear the door open, only realizing she had a visitor when a shadow fell across her desk. Looking up, she was surprised to see not Dawson, as she'd half expected, but Sheriff Blackburn standing in the doorway, his weathered face grave. "Miss Whitfield," he said, removing his hat. "Sorry to disturb you, but I need to speak with you about something important." Zara's heart quickened with alarm. "Of course, Sheriff. Please come in." He entered, closing the door behind him, and approached her desk. "It's about the Stagecoach robbery," he said without preamble. "We captured the last bandit this morning. He had some interesting things to say." "What sort of things?" Zara asked, puzzled by the sheriff's serious demeanor. "He claims the robbery wasn't random. Says they were hired to hit that specific coach." The sheriff's eyes were sharp on her face. "Says someone paid them to make sure certain passengers didn't reach Grass Valley." A chill ran through Zara. "Certain passengers, you mean?" "Me," Sheriff Blackburn nodded slowly. "That's what it sounds like. Any idea why someone might want to prevent you from reaching town?" Zara shook her head, stunned. "None at all. I don't have enemies, Sheriff. I lived a very ordinary life in Boston before coming here." "What about family?" Anyone who might have objected to you taking this position. My aunt was opposed to me coming west, but she would never. Zara paused, a memory surfacing. My cousin Philip was quite angry when I announced my intention to leave. He had expectations that I might marry him eventually. But he's not the sort of person who would resort to violence. The sheriff didn't look convinced. People can surprise you when they're desperate. Would this cousin have the means to hire men all the way out here? He works for my uncle's shipping company. He does have connections, I suppose, and access to funds. Zara felt sick at the thought. But surely he wouldn't go to such extremes. I've seen men do worse for less, the sheriff replied grimly. Miss Whitfield, until we know more, I'd advise you to be cautious. Don't go anywhere alone if you can help it. You think I'm still in danger? The question came out steadier than she felt. Hard to say. If this cousin of yours was behind it, he might try again, or he might give up now that you're established here. Sheriff Blackburn sighed. I've sent a telegram to the authorities in Boston asking about this Philip. Until we hear back, just be alert. I will, Zara promised. Thank you for telling me. The sheriff nodded, then hesitated. I've also informed Dawson. Hope you don't mind, but he has a way of knowing things before they happen. Figure having him keep an eye out can't hurt. Before Zara could respond, the door opened again, and Dawson himself appeared, his expression tense. Seeing them both, he relaxed slightly. You told her, he said to the sheriff, not a question. Just finished, Sheriff Blackburn confirmed. I'll leave you two to talk. Got to get back to question that prisoner some more. With a nod to them both, he departed, closing the door behind him. Dawson crossed to Zara's desk in long strides. Are you all right? I think so, she replied, though her hands trembled slightly as she gathered her papers. It's just unsettling to think someone might have wanted to harm me. Blackburn told me about your cousin, Dawson said, his voice hardening. If he's responsible, he'll answer for it. The protective edge in his tone warmed Zara even as she tried to process the sheriff's revelations. It seemed so far-fetched. Philip was always self-centered and entitled, but to arrange something like this. Men like that can't stand being denied what they believe is rightfully theirs, Dawson said, his hand closing into a fist on the desk. If he thought you belonged to him. I never gave him any reason to think so, Zara protested. I made it very clear I had no interest in marriage to him. Dawson's expression softened. It's not your fault, Zara. Some men just can't accept rejection. He straightened, offering his arm. Come on, I'll walk you back to the boarding house. As they left the schoolhouse, Zara was acutely aware of glances from townspeople they passed. Word of their budding relationship had clearly spread, and she wondered what people would think of Dawson escorting her so soon after her conversation with the sheriff. Would they connect the two events? Would they think her involved in something unsavory? Stop worrying about what they think, Dawson said quietly, seeming to read her thoughts. People will talk regardless. What matters is that you're safe. Zara managed a small smile. How did you know what I was thinking? Your face is very expressive, he replied, his tone lightening. Especially your eyes. They give you away. They reached the boarding house too quickly for Zara's liking. At the bottom of the porch steps, Dawson turned to her. I meant to ask before all this came up, how was your first day of teaching? The question was so ordinary, so normal after the sheriff's disturbing news, that Zara found herself relaxing for the first time since Blackburn had entered her classroom. It was wonderful, actually, she said, realizing it was true despite the unsettling end to the day. The children are eager to learn and they were very welcoming. I'm glad. Dawson's smile was genuine, his eyes warm on her face. You were meant to be here, Zara. Don't let anyone make you doubt that. His certainty was reassuring. Thank you, Dawson, for everything. He glanced up at the boarding house, where curtains were predictably twitching. I'd like to kiss you properly, but I think we've given the town enough to talk about for one day. Instead, he raised her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles that somehow felt as intimate as the kiss they'd shared on the hillside. "I'll see you tomorrow," he promised. "And Zara, try not to worry. You're not alone in this." As she watched him walk away, Zara felt a curious mixture of emotions: concern over the sheriff's news, happiness from her successful first day of teaching, and a deepening affection for the quiet, protective man who had entered her life so unexpectedly. Whatever came next, she knew with absolute certainty that Dawson Ryder would be by her side to face it with her. The next few weeks settled into a rhythm for Zara. Her days were filled with teaching, her evenings often spent in Dawson's company as their relationship deepened. True to his word, he visited the schoolhouse regularly, sometimes walking her home, other times taking her for drives in his buggy or rides on gentle mares from his ranch. The sheriff received word from Boston confirming that Philip Whitfield had indeed left the city abruptly around the time of the Stagecoach robbery, ostensibly on business for his father's shipping company. While this wasn't proof of his involvement, it was suspicious enough to maintain the sheriff's vigilance. Zara wrote to her aunt, carefully inquiring about Philip's whereabouts without revealing her concerns, but had yet to receive a reply. Despite these worries simmering in the background, Zara found herself thriving in Grass Valley. Her students were progressing well, the townspeople had accepted her as one of their own, and her feelings for Dawson grew stronger with each passing day. On a crisp Saturday morning in early October, nearly a month after her arrival in Grass Valley, Dawson arrived at the boarding house on horseback rather than with the buggy. "I thought we might ride today," he suggested when Zara met him on the porch. "That is, if you're still interested in learning to ride Western style." Zara brightened at the prospect. "I'd love to. Just give me a moment to change." She hurried upstairs to don her split riding skirt, a practical garment she'd had made shortly after arriving in Wyoming, anticipating the need to ride. When she returned, Dawson's appreciative glance made her glad she'd invested in the practical but becoming outfit. "You look ready for adventure," he commented, helping her mount the gentle mare he'd brought for her, a dappled gray named Willow. "I am," Zara replied with a smile. "Where are we going?" "I thought I'd show you some of my favorite places around Grass Valley," Dawson said, swinging up onto Midnight's back. "If you're comfortable riding that far." "Lead on," Zara said confidently, settling into the saddle. They rode north out of town, following the now familiar trail to Dawson's ranch, but instead of turning in at his gate, they continued along a less traveled path that wound up into the foothills. The day was perfect for riding, cool but sunny, with a clarity to the air that made the mountains seem close enough to touch. Zara found that her riding lessons in Boston had prepared her well, though the Western saddle took some getting used to. Willow was responsive and steady, following Midnight's lead without fuss. As they climbed higher, the views became increasingly spectacular. Valleys spread out below them, patchworked with ranches and farms, while streams glinted like silver ribbons in the sunlight. "It's breathtaking," Zara said when they paused to rest the horses at a small plateau. "I've never seen anything like it." Dawson dismounted and helped her down, his hands strong and sure at her waist. "This is just the beginning," he promised. "There's a place up ahead I want to show you." They left the horses' ground tied in a grassy area and continued on foot, following a narrow trail through a stand of aspen trees whose leaves had turned golden with the season. The path climbed steeply for a time, then suddenly opened onto a rocky outcropping that offered a panoramic view of the entire valley. "Oh," Zara breathed, stunned by the vista before her. From this height, she could see Grass Valley nestled in its valley, the river winding beside it, and beyond that, the vast expanse of Wyoming stretching to the horizon. "Worth the climb?" Dawson asked, watching her face. "Absolutely," she assured him. "How did you find this place?" I was tracking a mountain lion that had been preying on calves at a neighboring ranch, he explained. The trail led me up here. Never did find the lion, but I found something better. They sat side by side on a flat rock, enjoying the view and the perfect solitude of their perch. After a comfortable silence, Dawson spoke again, his voice thoughtful. I come here sometimes when I need to think to get perspective. Reminds me how small our problems really are in the grand scheme of things. Zara glanced at him, sensing there was more to his words. What are you thinking about today? He turned to look at her, his blue eyes serious. Us. The future, what I want and what's right to ask of you, her heart quickened. What do you mean? Dawson took her hand, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. Zara, these past weeks have been the happiest I can remember. When I'm with you, I feel complete in a way I never have before. I feel the same, she said softly. But I've been thinking about what you left behind in Boston, the comforts, the culture, the society. My life here is simple. I can offer you a good home, security, my heart, but not the kind of life you grew up with. Zara squeezed his hand. Dawson, I didn't come west looking for the life I had in Boston. I came looking for something real, something that was mine. And I found it in Grass Valley, in my teaching, and most of all in you. His expression lightened, hope replacing uncertainty in his eyes. You're sure? Because I want to ask you something important, but only if you're certain this is where you want to be. Understanding dawned, and Zara felt a flutter of anticipation in her chest. I've never been more certain of anything. Dawson shifted to face her fully, still holding her hand. I had a whole speech prepared, he admitted with a rueful smile, but being here with you now, words seem inadequate. Try anyway, Zara encouraged, her voice barely above a whisper. He nodded, took a deep breath, and spoke from his heart. Zara Whitfield, I love you. I think I've loved you since the moment you climbed down from that stagecoach and faced those outlaws with such courage. Every day since then, my feelings have only grown stronger. I want to spend my life with you to build a future together. He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small velvet box. Will you marry me? Opening the box, he revealed a ring with a modest but brilliant diamond set in gold. It was simple yet beautiful, perfectly suited to Zara's taste. Yes, she said without hesitation, tears of joy welling in her eyes. Yes, Dawson, I will marry you. His smile was radiant as he slipped the ring onto her finger, then gathered her into his arms for a kiss that sealed their promise to each other. When they finally parted, both breathless, he rested his forehead against hers. I was so afraid you might think it was too soon, he confessed. Zara smiled, her hand against his cheek. In Boston, it would be scandalously soon, but here it feels right. When you know, you know. They remained on the mountaintop for a time, making plans for their future. Dawson suggested a December wedding, after the fall term of school ended, but before winter set in fully. Zara agreed, thinking it would give her time to write to her aunt, and perhaps even persuade her to attend the ceremony. As the afternoon began to wane, they reluctantly made their way back to the horses for the ride down to town. Zara found herself gazing frequently at the ring on her finger, still scarcely believing that she, who had come west seeking independence, had found instead a partnership that promised to enhance rather than diminish her freedom. When they reached Grass Valley, Dawson suggested they stop at the sheriff's office first to share their news with Sheriff Blackburn, whom Zara had come to understand was Dawson's closest friend. The sheriff congratulated them warmly, though Zara noticed a shadow cross his face when Dawson mentioned their plans to announce the engagement at church the following day. Something wrong, James? Dawson asked, also noticing his friend's reaction. The sheriff hesitated, then sighed. Might as well tell you now. Got a telegram this morning from the marshal in Cheyenne. Seems your cousin Philip arrived there 2 days ago, asking questions about stagecoaches to Grass Valley. Zara felt a chill despite the warmth of the sheriff's office. He's here. In Wyoming. "Looks that way," Blackburn confirmed. "Can't arrest him without proof he was behind the robbery, but I've sent word to the stage line to alert me if he books passage to Grass Valley." Dawson's arm tightened around Zara's waist. "Let him come," he said, his voice hard. "I'd like to have a word with the man who tried to have Zara killed." "Dawson," the sheriff warned, "don't go looking for trouble. Let me handle this officially." "Of course," Dawson agreed, though something in his tone made Zara suspect he wasn't being entirely truthful. "But if he shows his face in Grass Valley, he'll answer to me for what he did." Sheriff Blackburn looked as if he wanted to argue further, but instead just shook his head resignedly. "Just be careful, both of you, and congratulations again on your engagement. It's about time you found some happiness, Dawson." As they left the sheriff's office, Zara could feel the tension in Dawson's body through their linked arms. "Please don't do anything rash," she said quietly. "If Philip is coming here, let the sheriff handle it." Dawson's expression softened as he looked down at her. "I won't seek him out, Zara, but I won't stand by if he tries to harm you again." She couldn't fault him for that protective instinct. Fair enough. "But promise me you'll be careful. I've only just agreed to marry you. I'd like to actually make it to the altar." His laugh eased the tension between them. "I promise. Now, let's go tell Mrs. Henderson our news before someone else beats us to it." Mrs. Henderson's reaction to their engagement was everything they could have hoped for: genuine delight, tears of joy, and immediate offers to help with wedding preparations. By supper time, the news had spread throughout the boarding house, and Zara found herself the center of attention as the other boarders offered their congratulations. That night, as Zara prepared for bed, she sat at her small writing desk to pen a letter to her aunt, sharing her news and extending an invitation to the wedding. As she wrote, she realized how much her life had changed in just a few short weeks. She had come to Wyoming seeking independence, and had found instead a sense of belonging she had never experienced in Boston, a community that valued her, students who needed her, and a man who loved her for exactly who she was. The shadow of Philip's possible arrival in Grass Valley hung at the edges of her happiness, but Zara refused to let fear dominate her thoughts. Whatever happened, she would face it with Dawson by her side. That knowledge gave her a strength she had never known before. The following morning, Zara and Dawson attended church together, their engagement now public knowledge. After the service, Reverend Wells announced their intention to marry, and the congregation erupted in applause and well wishes. It seemed the entire town approved of their match, though Zara noticed that Dawson appeared slightly uncomfortable with being the center of so much attention. "Not used to everyone looking at me unless I've done something wrong," he murmured as they received congratulations from yet another group of townsfolk. Zara squeezed his hand sympathetically. "It will die down soon enough. People are just happy for us." As the crowd around them thinned, Zara spotted an unfamiliar figure standing at the edge of the churchyard, a well-dressed man observing the proceedings with a frown. Her breath caught as recognition dawned. "Dawson," she whispered urgently. "That's Philip." Dawson's head turned sharply in the direction she indicated, his posture immediately alert. "Are you sure? Positive?" Zara felt ill at the sight of her cousin, his presence a jarring intrusion into her new life. "What should we do?" Before Dawson could answer, Sheriff Blackburn appeared beside them, having also noticed the newcomer. "I'll handle this," he said quietly. "Stay here." They watched as the sheriff approached Philip, who straightened his already impeccable clothing as if preparing for a confrontation. Though too far away to hear their exchange, Zara could see from Philip's gestures that he was being haughty and dismissive. After a brief conversation, both men began walking toward Zara and Dawson. Philip's expression was one of barely contained fury, while the sheriff looked grimly determined. "Miss Whitfield," Sheriff Blackburn said formally when they reached them, This gentleman claims to be your cousin and insists on speaking with you. I told him that would be your decision." Zara lifted her chin, drawing strength from Dawson's presence beside her. "Hello, Philip." "This is unexpected." Philip Whitfield was a handsome man in his late 20s, with meticulously groomed dark hair and the kind of refined features that came from generations of good breeding. His expensive suit and polished boots looked absurdly out of place in the dusty churchyard of Grass Valley. "Zara," he said, ignoring Dawson and the sheriff, "thank God I've found you. Your aunt has been beside herself with worry." "Has she?" Zara replied coolly. "Strange, as I've written to her regularly since my arrival." Philip waved this aside impatiently. "Letters take ages to arrive. She sent me to bring you home." "I am home," Zara said firmly, "and I have no intention of returning to Boston." She moved closer to Dawson, who placed a protective arm around her waist. "Philip, this is my fiancé, Dawson Ryder. Dawson, my cousin Philip Whitfield." Philip's face darkened at the word fiancé, his eyes narrowing as he took in Dawson's plain Sunday suit and weathered features. "Fiancé? Surely you're joking. You can't possibly be serious about marrying some frontier nobody." Dawson's arm tightened fractionally around Zara's waist, but his voice remained even. "Mr. Whitfield, I understand you're surprised, but I suggest you watch your tone when speaking about the woman I intend to marry." "Or what?" Philip sneered. "Will you shoot me like you shot those unfortunate men on the stagecoach?" A hush fell over the remaining churchgoers who had been watching the confrontation with undisguised interest. Sheriff Blackburn stepped forward, his hand moving to rest on his gun belt. "That's a serious accusation, Mr. Whitfield," the sheriff said. "Those men were outlaws attempting to rob and possibly murder the passengers." "Were they?" Philip's smile was ugly. "Or were they simply hired to delay the coach, only to be gunned down by this vigilante?" Dawson's expression hardened, but his voice remained calm. "You seem to know a lot about what those men were hired to do, Mr. Whitfield. Almost as if you had first-hand knowledge." Philip's face flushed, but he recovered quickly. "Mere speculation based on what I've heard since arriving in this God-forsaken territory." "Philip," Zara interrupted, her patience exhausted, "why are you really here? It can't simply be concern for my welfare, since you never showed much interest in that before." For a moment, Philip's mask of civility slipped, revealing the anger beneath. "You know very well why I'm here, Zara. You were meant to be my wife. Your father promised you to me before he died." Zara stared at him, stunned. "What? That's absurd. Father never would have made such an arrangement without telling me." "He didn't want to pressure you while you were still grieving for your mother," Philip said, his voice softening in what Zara recognized as false sincerity. "But he and my father agreed that our marriage would unite the family businesses. It was his dying wish, Zara." "I don't believe you," Zara said flatly. "Father respected my independence too much to arrange my marriage, especially to someone like you." Philip's expression hardened again. "Someone like me. I am your equal in every way, Zara. This Cowboy is beneath you. Come home with me now and we can forget this unfortunate incident." "The lady has made her choice," Dawson said, his voice dangerously quiet. "I suggest you respect it and leave Grass Valley." Philip ignored him, focusing entirely on Zara. "Think carefully, cousin. If you stay, certain revelations about your father's financial dealings in his final years might come to light, revelations that could tarnish his memory and the Whitfield name forever." Zara felt as if she'd been struck. "You're blackmailing me with lies about my father." "Not lies, unfortunately," Philip said smoothly. "Just indiscretions that your uncle and I have managed to keep quiet out of respect for your mother's memory. But if you persist in this foolishness, we may not be able to maintain that discretion." Before Zara could respond, Dawson stepped forward, placing himself between her and Philip. "That's enough," he said, his voice cold with anger. You've said your piece, now leave. Philip's hand moved to his coat pocket. I don't take orders from the movement was too deliberate to be innocent. Sheriff Blackburn's gun was drawn and pointed at Philip before he could complete his sentence. Don't, the sheriff warned. Whatever you've got in that pocket, leave it there. Philip froze, then slowly raised his hands. This is outrageous. I am a respectable businessman being threatened by a small-town sheriff. A respectable businessman doesn't try to draw a weapon in a churchyard, Sheriff Blackburn replied evenly. Turn around, Mr. Whitfield. You're under arrest for attempted assault. This is absurd. I demand to see a lawyer, Philip protested as the sheriff handcuffed him. You can demand all you want from my jail cell, Blackburn said, unmoved. We'll sort this out properly with witnesses present. He looked at Dawson and Zara. I'll need both of you to come to my office later to give statements. As the sheriff led a protesting Philip away, the remaining onlookers began to disperse, murmuring among themselves about the dramatic scene they had just witnessed. Zara found herself trembling, the full impact of the confrontation hitting her now that the immediate danger had passed. Dawson led her to a bench beneath a tree at the edge of the churchyard, sitting beside her and taking her hands in his. Are you all right? I think so, Zara replied, though her voice shook slightly. I can't believe he would stoop so low, threatening my father's memory like that. Do you think there's any truth to what he said, about your father arranging your marriage to him? Zara shook her head firmly. None whatsoever. Father was a progressive thinker who believed in a woman's right to choose her own path. He would never have made such an arrangement, especially not with someone like Philip, whom he always regarded as spoiled and unprincipled. And the financial improprieties, equally false, I'm certain. Father was scrupulously honest in his business dealings. It was one of the reasons his shipping company was so respected. Zara sighed. Philip was obviously desperate, grasping at anything that might persuade me to return to Boston with him. Dawson's expression darkened. I think it goes beyond desperation, Zara. The way he reached for his pocket. I believe he came here intending to harm you if he couldn't persuade you. The thought chilled Zara to the bone. Do you really think he would have gone that far? A man who would hire outlaws to rob a stagecoach is capable of anything. Dawson squeezed her hands gently. But he can't hurt you now. The sheriff will keep him locked up until a circuit judge can hear the case. Zara nodded, drawing comfort from Dawson's steady presence. Thank you for standing by me. Always, he promised, brushing a strand of hair from her face. Nothing and no one will come between us, Zara. Not your cousin, not the past, nothing. In that moment, with the autumn sun filtering through the leaves above them and the man she loved beside her, Zara believed him with all her heart. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. Later that afternoon, after giving their statements to Sheriff Blackburn, Dawson suggested they ride out to his ranch for dinner with Luke and Molly. To clear our heads, he explained, and to celebrate our engagement properly, away from the gossip of town. Zara readily agreed, eager to put distance between herself and the memory of Philip's threats. The ride to the ranch was peaceful, the familiar landscape working its magic on her troubled spirit. At the ranch, Molly greeted them with obvious delight at the news of their engagement, immediately insisting that they stay for a special dinner to celebrate. Little Jamie presented Zara with a somewhat lopsided drawing of what appeared to be a horse, but might have been a large dog, which she accepted with genuine appreciation. As the women prepared dinner, Dawson took Zara to see the progress of young Diamond, the colt born the day of her first visit to the ranch. The foal had nearly doubled in size and showed signs of becoming as fine a horse as his parents. He'll be yours, Dawson said as they watched Diamond frisk around his mother in the paddock. A wedding present. Zara looked up at him in surprise. But he's valuable breeding stock, isn't he? He is, Dawson acknowledged. But I want you to have him. Besides, he'll still be part of our herd. Our ranch. The words filled Zara with a sense of belonging she had never experienced in Boston. This would be her home, these horses part of her life, this man her partner in building a future together. Dinner was a joyous affair, with Luke opening a bottle of wine he'd been saving for a special occasion, and Molly serving her best dishes. As they ate and talked, Zara found the shadows of the morning's confrontation receding, replaced by the warmth of friendship and the promise of the life she and Dawson would build together. After dinner, while Luke and Molly cleared the table, Dawson took Zara's hand. "Let's go for a walk," he suggested. "There's something I want to show you." They strolled hand in hand through the orchard and up the gentle slope to what Zara now thought of as their hilltop, where Dawson had proposed. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson that took her breath away. "It never gets old, does it?" she said, gazing out at the panoramic view. "Never," Dawson agreed. "But that's not what I brought you here to see." He pointed to a flat area just below the hilltop, where the land formed a natural plateau. "What do you think of that spot?" Zara looked where he was pointing, taking in the level ground, the view of both the mountains and the ranch below, and the sheltering grove of trees to one side. "It's lovely," she said, not entirely sure what he was asking. Dawson smiled, a hint of nervousness in his expression that she found endearing. "I thought, that is, if you like the idea, we could build our home there." Zara's heart swelled with emotion. "Our home." He nodded, warming to his theme now that he'd broached the subject. "I've been living in the cabin since I bought the ranch, but it's too small for a family. I thought we could design something together, something with plenty of room for children, for books, for whatever you want." "With a porch facing the sunset," Zara added, catching his enthusiasm, "and big windows to let in the light." "Exactly," Dawson said, clearly pleased by her response. "We could start building right away. It wouldn't be finished by December for the wedding, but maybe by spring." "It sounds perfect," Zara assured him, rising on tiptoe to kiss him softly. "Absolutely perfect." As they stood together on the hillside, planning their future home, Zara felt a profound sense of rightness settle over her. This was where she belonged beside this man, in this wild, beautiful country that had already claimed her heart as surely as Dawson had. The weeks that followed were busy ones for Zara and Dawson. Between her teaching duties and his ranch responsibilities, they found time to begin planning both their wedding and their new home. Dawson hired a builder from Cheyenne to draw up plans based on their ideas, and construction began on the house site they had chosen. Philip remained in the Grass Valley jail, his protests growing increasingly strident as the days passed. Sheriff Blackburn, unmoved by threats of legal action, maintained that Philip would remain in custody until the circuit judge arrived in early November. Meanwhile, Zara received a letter from her aunt expressing shock at both her engagement and Philip's arrest. The letter hinted at the family's disappointment, but stopped short of the accusations Philip had made, suggesting to Zara that her cousin's claims had indeed been fabrications born of desperation. As October gave way to November, the weather turned colder, with the first snowflakes dusting the mountains around Grass Valley. Zara found herself increasingly busy with school activities, preparing her students for a Thanksgiving recitation that had become an annual tradition in the town. One crisp Wednesday afternoon, as she was dismissing her class, Sheriff Blackburn appeared at the schoolhouse door, his expression grave. Zara's heart sank, immediately fearing bad news about Dawson. "Sheriff, what's happened?" she asked as the last student departed. "Nothing to worry about, Miss Whitfield," he assured her quickly, seeing her alarm. "But I thought you should know that the circuit judge arrived this morning and has reviewed the charges against your cousin." "And," Zara prompted when he hesitated. "And he's ordered him released," the sheriff said with evident displeasure. "Says there's insufficient evidence to hold him on attempted assault since he never actually drew a weapon." Zara sank into her chair, dismayed by this news. So he's free to. What? Try again. Not exactly, Sheriff Blackburn said, his expression lightening somewhat. The judge may have released him from jail, but he also ordered him to leave the territory immediately. Said his presence was disruptive to the peace of the community. Phillips on the afternoon stage to Cheyenne under escort from one of my deputies. Relief flooded through Zara. So he's gone. For good. Should be, the sheriff confirmed. My deputy has instructions to see him onto the eastbound train in Cheyenne. And I've sent telegrams to the sheriffs in every town between here and the territorial border, letting them know Mr. Whitfield isn't welcome back. Thank you, Sheriff, Zara said sincerely, for everything you've done to protect me. He tipped his hat. Just doing my job, Miss Whitfield. Besides, Dawson would have my hide if I let anything happen to his bride-to-be. Speaking of Dawson, he arrived at the schoolhouse minutes after the sheriff departed, having evidently already heard the news. His expression was a mixture of relief and lingering concern. The sheriff told you. He asked as he helped Zara gather her books and papers. She nodded. He said Phillips on his way back east. Good riddance, Dawson said grimly, though I'd have preferred to see him stand trial for what he did. As would I, Zara agreed. But at least he's gone, and we can focus on our future without his shadow hanging over us. Dawson's expression softened. Speaking of our future, I have news. The house foundation is complete, and the framing will begin next week. The builder thinks we might have the exterior finished before the heavy snows come. That's wonderful, Zara exclaimed, genuinely pleased by this progress. Will we be able to see it this weekend? Absolutely. I thought we could ride out on Saturday afternoon, check on the progress, maybe have a picnic if the weather holds. As they left the schoolhouse together, arm in arm, Zara felt a deep contentment settle over her. With Philip gone and their wedding less than a month away, the future stretched before them bright with promise. The following Saturday dawned clear but cold, the kind of crystalline autumn day that hints at winter's approach. Dawson arrived at the boarding house mid-afternoon, having spent the morning working with Sheriff Blackburn on a case involving stolen cattle from a neighboring ranch. Ready for that ride? He asked when Zara greeted him, his smile warming his features despite the evident fatigue in his eyes. Are you sure you're not too tired? Zara asked, concerned. Mrs. Henderson said you and the sheriff were out most of the night tracking those cattle thieves. We were, Dawson admitted, but we caught them, and the thought of spending the afternoon with you was what kept me going. He took her hand, his thumb brushing over her engagement ring. Besides, I have something special planned. Intrigued, Zara fetched her warmest coat and riding gloves, then followed Dawson to where he had tethered the horses Midnight for himself and the gentle Willow for her. They mounted and set off toward the ranch, the horses' breath forming small clouds in the crisp air. As they rode, Dawson told her about the cattle rustlers, a gang of 3 men who had been working their way through the ranches of the region, stealing small numbers of cattle from each to avoid immediate detection. They made the mistake of hitting the Sanderson place, he explained. Old man Sanderson counts his cattle every night, rain or shine. He noticed 5 missing within hours. Will they go to jail? Zara asked. For a good long while, Dawson confirmed. Sheriff's holding them for the circuit judge, who's still in town dealing with some property disputes. They reached the ranch and exchanged brief greetings with Luke, who was mending a fence near the entrance, before continuing up the slope toward their building site. As they crested the hill, Zara gasped in delight at what she saw. The foundation she had expected, but the framing was already well underway, the skeleton of their future home taking shape against the backdrop of mountains and sky. Workers moved among the lumber, hammering and sawing, their progress visible even from a distance. Dawson, she exclaimed. You said they were just starting the framing next week, he grinned, pleased by her reaction. I wanted to surprise you. The builder brought in extra men when the weather forecast looked favorable. Says if we're lucky, we might have the roof on before the first big snow. They dismounted and approached the construction site, where the foreman greeted them with a tip of his hat. "Coming along nicely, isn't it, Mr. Ryder? Madam, your husband-to-be has been out here every morning at dawn checking our progress." "Has he indeed?" Zara said, smiling up at Dawson. "Guilty as charged," Dawson admitted. "I'm eager to see it finished." The foreman led them through the partially framed structure, pointing out where each room would be the spacious kitchen with its view of the mountains, the large living area with space for a stone fireplace, the study where Zara could prepare her lessons, and upstairs, 3 bedrooms including a master suite with its own small balcony overlooking the valley. "It's going to be beautiful," Zara said, already able to envision the finished home in her mind. "When do you think it will be ready to move in?" "Spring, most likely," the foreman replied. "We'll get the exterior closed in before winter, then work on the interior through the cold months as weather permits. Should be ready for furnishing by April, maybe sooner if the winter's mild." After thanking the foreman and his crew, Dawson and Zara left the construction site and rode a little farther up the hill to the very top, where they dismounted again for the picnic Dawson had promised. He spread a blanket on a sheltered patch of grass and unpacked a basket that Molly had prepared cold chicken, fresh bread, apple tarts, and a bottle of cider. As they ate, enjoying the panoramic view of the valley and the mountains beyond, Zara found herself overwhelmed with gratitude for the path her life had taken. "Penny for your thoughts?" Dawson asked, noticing her contemplative expression. "I was just thinking how different my life might have been if I hadn't answered that advertisement for a teacher in Grass Valley," she replied. "If I'd stayed in Boston, married someone my aunt approved of, lived the life that was expected of me." "Regrets?" There was a hint of uncertainty in his voice that made her heart ache. "Not a single one," she assured him, reaching for his hand. "Coming here was the best decision I ever made. Meeting you was." She paused, searching for the right words. "It was like coming home to a place I'd never been before." "Does that make any sense?" "Perfect sense," Dawson said, his eyes soft with love. "I felt the same way that first day, watching you climb down from that stagecoach with your head held high despite everything that had happened. Something in me recognized you, even though we'd never met." They sat in companionable silence for a time, watching as the sun began its descent toward the western horizon, painting the landscape in gold and amber. The air grew colder as shadows lengthened, but neither was eager to leave their private sanctuary. "3 weeks until the wedding," Dawson remarked, his thumb tracing circles on the back of her hand. "Having second thoughts yet? Not a chance," Zara replied with a smile. "Are you?" "Never." His expression grew serious. "Zara, before we marry, there's something I should tell you. About my time in the war." She squeezed his hand encouragingly. "You can tell me anything, Dawson. You know that." He nodded, his gaze fixed on the distant mountains as if drawing strength from their solid presence. "I told you I was in the cavalry, which is true. What I didn't say was that I was also a scout. Because of my tracking skills, I was sent behind enemy lines to gather intelligence." Zara listened quietly, understanding that this was difficult for him to share. "One night I was discovered by a Confederate patrol," he continued, his voice dropping lower. "There was a firefight. I killed 3 men that night, men who were just doing their duty as they saw it. I've never been able to forget their faces." He paused, drawing a deep breath. "After that, I was assigned to a special unit that operated exclusively behind enemy lines. We did things. Necessary things for the Union victory, but things that don't sit easy in a man's conscience afterward." "Oh, Dawson," Zara said softly, understanding now the shadows she sometimes glimpsed in his eyes. "I came west afterward because I couldn't face going home, Couldn't bear my family seeing what I'd become. He finally turned to look at her, his expression vulnerable in a way she'd never seen before. I wanted you to know this part of me before we married. To be sure you can accept all of me. Without hesitation, Zara moved closer, taking his face between her hands. Listen to me, Dawson Ryder. What you did in the war was your duty, as painful as it might have been. It doesn't define you. What defines you is the man you are now, the man who protects this community, who builds homes for horses and people alike, who loves with his whole heart. That's the man I'm marrying, and I couldn't be more certain of my choice. The tension in his shoulders eased visibly at her words. I don't deserve you, he murmured. You deserve happiness, Zara corrected him. We both do, and we've found it together. Their kiss was tender at first, then deepened with a passion that had been growing between them since their engagement. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Dawson rested his forehead against hers. 3 more weeks, he said with a rueful smile. Feels like forever. It will pass quickly, Zara assured him, though she felt the same impatience. We have the rest of our lives ahead of us. As the sun dipped below the horizon, they packed up their picnic and rode back to town. The comfortable silence between them filled with unspoken promises of the future they would build together. The following weeks passed in a blur of preparations for both the wedding and the approaching holiday season. Zara's students presented their Thanksgiving recitation to the town's delight, and preparations began for the Christmas program that would take place just before the school's winter break. Wedding plans proceeded smoothly, with the entire town seemingly involved in one way or another. Mrs. Henderson and the ladies of the church took charge of decorating, while Molly oversaw the wedding dinner that would be served at the hotel after the ceremony. Zara's dress, a creation of ivory silk with pearl beading that she had ordered from Denver, arrived safely and required only minor alterations, which the town's seamstress was happy to provide. Zara received another letter from her aunt, this one considerably warmer in tone than the first. While she still expressed reservations about Zara's hasty engagement, she wished her niece happiness and enclosed a family heirloom, a lace handkerchief that had been carried by Whitfield brides for 3 generations as a wedding gift. The letter made no mention of Philip, which Zara took as a positive sign. As the wedding day approached, Zara found herself increasingly caught up in the joy of the occasion. Her initial concerns about the speed of their courtship, long since replaced by absolute certainty that Dawson was the man she was meant to spend her life with. On the morning of December 15, 1882, Zara awoke to the sight of snowflakes drifting past her window, a gentle snowfall that dusted Grass Valley in white without making travel difficult. Perfect weather for a winter wedding. As tradition dictated, she had not seen Dawson since the previous afternoon, when he had escorted her back to the boarding house after a final meeting with Reverend Wells to discuss the ceremony. Mrs. Henderson and the other ladies of the boarding house helped Zara prepare for her wedding day, assisting with her hair and dress, and offering the kind of motherly advice she had missed since her own mother's passing. By the time they were finished, Zara hardly recognized the elegant woman in the mirror as the same person who had stepped off the stagecoach in Grass Valley just 3 months earlier. "You look beautiful, my dear," Mrs. Henderson said, blinking back tears as she adjusted Zara's veil. "Absolutely radiant." "Thank you," Zara replied, her own eyes moist with emotion, "for everything. You've made me feel so at home here." "Because you are home," Mrs. Henderson said firmly. "You belong in Grass Valley, and we're all so happy that you and Dawson found each other." A knock at the door announced the arrival of Sheriff Blackburn, who had offered to escort Zara to the church in Dawson's absence. As her closest friend in town apart from Dawson, the sheriff had readily agreed when Zara asked if he would give her away. "Miss Whitfield," he said as she emerged from her room, his eyes widening at the sight of her in her wedding finery. You are a vision. Dawson is a fortunate man indeed. Thank you, Sheriff, Zara replied, accepting his gallantly offered arm. Shall we go? I don't want to keep him waiting. The church was filled to capacity when they arrived, the entire population of Grass Valley having turned out for the occasion. As Zara paused in the vestibule, gathering her courage for the walk down the aisle, she heard the strains of music beginning Mrs. Porter at the church's small organ, playing the wedding march that would signal her entrance. Ready? Sheriff Blackburn asked quietly. Zara nodded, too overcome with emotion to speak. The doors opened, and every head turned to watch as Zara began her journey toward the altar where Dawson waited, resplendent in a new black suit, his expression transforming from nervous anticipation to awestruck wonder as he caught sight of his bride. The ceremony itself passed in a blur for Zara, though she would later remember the warmth of Dawson's hands holding hers, the depth of emotion in his voice as he recited his vows, and the moment when Reverend Wells pronounced them husband and wife. Dawson's kiss was gentle and reverent, mindful of their audience but still conveying the depth of his love for her. The celebration that followed at the hotel was joyous and heartfelt, with speeches, dancing, and enough food to feed twice the number of guests present. As the newly married couple moved among their friends, accepting congratulations and well wishes, Zara was struck by how thoroughly she had been accepted into this community that had so recently been foreign to her. As evening approached, Dawson led Zara outside to where a sleigh waited, decorated with ribbons and bells, to take them to the cabin on his ranch where they would spend their wedding night before departing the following day for a brief honeymoon in Denver. Under a blanket of stars and wrapped in warm furs against the winter chill, they glided through the snow-covered landscape toward the ranch, the only sounds the jingling of the sleigh bells and the steady rhythm of the horses' hooves. "Happy, Mrs. Ryder?" Dawson asked, his arm tight around her shoulders. "Completely, Mr. Ryder," Zara replied, leaning into his embrace. "Though I think it may take some time to get used to my new name." "We have a lifetime for that," he assured her, pressing a kiss to her temple. The cabin was warm and welcoming when they arrived, a fire blazing in the hearth and candles, illuminating the simple but comfortable space that had been Dawson's home since he came to Wyoming. Molly had been there earlier, preparing the cabin for their arrival, and had left a cold supper and a bottle of champagne on the table. Later, as they lay together in the cabin's small bedroom, the glow of firelight flickering on the walls and the sound of the wind whispering outside, Zara felt a peace she had never known before. This was where she belonged in this rugged land, with this man who had captured her heart with his quiet strength and unwavering devotion. "What are you thinking?" Dawson asked, his fingers tracing patterns on her bare shoulder. "That I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be," Zara replied, lifting her head to look into his eyes. "That everything that happened, the Stagecoach robbery, Philip's threats, all of it led me to this moment with you." "Fate," Dawson suggested with a smile. "Perhaps," Zara agreed. "Or perhaps just extraordinarily good fortune." "Either way," Dawson said, drawing her closer, "I intend to spend the rest of my days ensuring you never regret your decision to stay in Grass Valley." "I already know I never will," Zara assured him, sealing her promise with a kiss that spoke of all the years of happiness that lay ahead of them. 5 years later, on a warm spring afternoon, Zara Ryder stood on the porch of her home, watching as Dawson helped their 3-year-old son, James, sit astride his very first pony. The gentle creature, a descendant of Mercury, stood patiently as the child giggled with delight at being a real cowboy like Papa. From her arms, baby Elizabeth, not quite a year old, observed the proceedings with wide-eyed fascination, occasionally reaching out as if trying to join her brother. "Your turn will come soon enough, little one," Zara murmured, pressing a kiss to her daughter's soft hair. The past 5 years had brought challenges and joys in equal measure. Their home had been completed as promised that spring after their wedding, and they had moved in just in time for Zara to finish the school year before resigning her position to focus on expanding both the ranch and their family. Under Dawson's careful management, the horse breeding business had thrived, with buyers coming from as far as California for Ryder Ranch stock. Diamond, the colt born the day of Zara's first visit to the ranch and given to her as a wedding present, had matured into a magnificent stallion whose offspring commanded top prices throughout the territory. Philip had never returned to Wyoming, though Zara occasionally received letters from her aunt with news of Boston, including the information that her cousin had finally married the daughter of a prominent shipping magnate and appeared to be settling into respectable family life. Sheriff Blackburn remained their closest friend, a frequent visitor to the ranch and honorary uncle to their children. Luke and Molly Peterson had stayed on, now occupying the old cabin where Dawson had lived before the house was built, and their son Jamie had been joined by twin sisters who were now the same age he had been when Zara first arrived in Grass Valley. As Zara watched Dawson leading the pony in a small circle, James securely seated and beaming with pride, her heart swelled with gratitude for the life they had built together. She thought back to that fateful day when the stagecoach had been robbed at dusk, and a quiet cowboy had appeared as if from nowhere, saying words that had changed her life forever. "Stay behind me until it's done." He had protected her then, and every day since, not just physically but in all the ways that mattered, supporting her dreams, respecting her opinions, loving her with a steadfastness that never wavered. "Mama, look," James called, waving excitedly. "I'm riding by myself." Dawson had stepped back, allowing the pony to walk freely while keeping a watchful eye on his son. He glanced up at Zara, his smile reflecting the same joy and pride she felt. In that moment, surrounded by the family and home they had created together, Zara knew with absolute certainty that every step of her journey had led exactly where she was meant to be. The stagecoach robbery that might have ended in tragedy had instead become the beginning of the greatest adventure of her life, an adventure that continued to unfold each day in this wild, beautiful land she now called home, beside the man who had captured her heart with his quiet strength and unwavering love. As the golden afternoon light bathed the ranch in warmth, Dawson joined Zara on the porch, wrapping an arm around her waist as they watched their son complete his first riding lesson. "Happy?" he asked, echoing the question he had asked on their wedding night. "More than I ever dreamed possible," Zara replied, leaning into his embrace, their daughter nestled between them, a family forged in the crucible of frontier life, bound together by love that had only grown stronger with each passing year. And as the sun began its slow descent toward the mountains, painting the Wyoming sky in shades of gold and crimson, Zara knew that whatever challenges the future might hold, they would face them together, just as they had from the moment a stagecoach was robbed at dusk and a cowboy said, "Stay behind me until it's done."